Street Fighter 6 is finally here, and to celebrate, I made custom Magic the Gathering cards based off of a few of the characters that we see in Street Fighter 6 that we didn't see in the old Street Fighter Secret Lair that we got a little while ago. First is Luke, Young Coach, a 5/5 legendary human warrior for 3 red and a green with Sandblast. Tap and deal 2 damage to target creature, and whenever Luke attacks, choose 1. No Chaser. Luke gains Trample until end of turn. Or Impaler. Luke gains First Strike until end of turn. Luke is our new protagonist of this new age of Street Fighter, and he brings a lot of cool stuff to the table. To start off with, his Fireball-esque attack, Sandblast. And to represent it in Magic the Gathering, I made it so you can tap him to essentially shock another creature by activating him, which is also kind of a reference to the Hadouken card that we saw in the Secret Lair, essentially being a slightly worse version considering we can only target creatures and it does less damage. Another mechanic about Luke is that he has a special move called Avenger, where he runs into the other fighter and then can turn it into an overhead attack called Impaler, or he can do it into a shoulder slam attack called No Chaser. And I decided to represent this in Magic the Gathering by making it so when you attack another player, essentially being the idea that Luke's running at another fighter in Street Fighter, you can transform it into No Chaser or Impaler in the Magic the Gathering sense, giving you Trample or First Strike, since I think First Strike is closer to an overhead, and I think the Trample is closer to barreling through your opponents. I think if you wanted to build around Luke, I think the best thing you can do is give him Death Touch in some way, making his Trample very powerful or his First Strike very powerful, depending on what is more valuable for you in the situation. So give him Death Touch with stuff like Basilisk Collar, Serpent's Gift, or Bow of Nylea. Next is Cammy, Delta Red, a legendary 4/3 human warrior for blue, red, and white with haste and Cannon Strike. Whenever Cammy attacks, you may untap target creature defending player controls. If that creature blocks Cammy this turn, it's able to. And Spiral Arrow. Whenever Cammy is blocked, she gains Double Strike until end of turn. Cammy is of course one of the most iconic Street Fighter characters of all time, but unfortunately she wasn't given a card in the batch of cards that we got in the Street Fighter Secret Lair. So I decided she'd be a great character to represent here. Cammy of course is a super strong rushdown character and also my main in Street Fighter V, and to represent her in Magic the Gathering I decided to give the fact that she's a super fast rushdown character by giving her haste. Additionally, one of her most iconic special moves is her Cannon Strike, which allows her to dive down into the opponent mid-air, making it a super cool mix-up to just kind of shoot yourself at your opponents. So I thought the best way to represent this in Magic the Gathering was essentially to make it so you're forcing another creature to block her if it's able to. Kind of representing the idea that you're diving down into that specific creature your opponent controls. To synergize with Cannon Strike, I also gave her the ability Spiral Arrow, another one of her iconic moves where she has this spin dive through your opponents, allowing you to hit them multiple times. And of course, because you're hitting them multiple times, I thought the best way to represent this multi-hit move in Magic the Gathering would of course to give her Double Strike when you activate it, making her a creature killing machine in Jeskai colors. If you wanted to build around her, I think probably the best thing you can do is take advantage of that Double Strike by giving her Trample. So stuff like Ember Cleave, Lunar Frenzy, or Eldrazi Conscription would go amazing with her. Manon, Beautiful Judoka, is a 3/3 legendary human warrior for 1 white and a blue, and has, when Manon enters the battlefield or causes a creature an opponent controls to become tapped, put a metal counter on her. And then she has Ménage Doré. Tap target creature, deal damage equal to the number of metal counters on Manon, Beautiful Judoka. And Renouvoir, whenever Manon deals combat damage to another creature, tap it. Deal damage equal to the number of metal counters on Manon to it. Manon is one of the awesome new characters introduced in Street Fighter 6, and she has a super cool design built around her hit and command throws. Every time you land one, you get a medal. And for each medal you have on her, it increases the power of her subsequent throws. To represent this in Magic the Gathering, I represented, of course, the actual medals with these medal counters that I've introduced. And so you get one when she enters the battlefield, and whenever you tap another creature. Essentially presenting the idea that whenever you tap another creature an opponent controls, you're throwing them. So to represent her command grab, I made it so you have to tap her to activate it, and to represent her hit grab, I made it so you have to deal combat damage to another creature to activate it. And of course I made it so whenever you activate both of them, after you tap the creature you deal damage equal to the number of metal counters you control, representing the power increasing. If you wanted to build around her, I think probably the most straightforward build around would be using proliferate synergies, so stuff like the Sword of Truth and Justice, Tezzeret's Gambit, or Flux Channeler would work awesome with her. Next is Kimberly, Street Art Ninja, a 2/2 legendary human ninja for blue and a red with haste, and she enters the battlefield with 2 paint counters on her. And then she has Genius in play. You can pay 1 and a red and tap to choose one. Remove a paint counter from Kimberly Street Art Ninja to deal 2 damage to any target at the beginning of the next end step, or you can put a counter on Kimberly Street Art Ninja. Kimberly, of course, is another one of the characters newly introduced in Street Fighter 6. She's a super smart and very talented student of Guy, allowing her to use a bunch of powerful martial arts techniques, but also putting her own unique spin on them. In Street Fighter, she has this paint can mechanic, which is essentially a temporary resource which she can use a number of times throughout the match, but she can also regenerate them once she runs out of them. In Magic the Gathering, I decided to represent this mechanic by giving her paint counters, giving her 2 when she enters the battlefield, just like how she has 2 at the start of the match in Street Fighter. Then I represented her ability Genius at Play, which in Street Fighter allows her to use paint cans as kind of these mini grenades. And then once she runs out of paint cans that she can use, you can activate the ability again to regenerate your paint counters. Of course, in Magic, I represented this by allowing you to either remove a counter from her to deal 2 damage at the beginning of the next end step, representing that it's kind of like a time grenade, or you can put another counter on her by activating it. Of course, if you wanted to build around her, you could use a lot of the proliferate synergies that I mentioned with Manon, but you can also take her in a more interesting direction and build around that damage and run a bunch of damage doublers with her. So stuff like Torbrand, Furnace of Wrath, or Fire Emancipation would be super cool with her. Next is Jamie, Dancing Peacekeeper, a legendary human warrior for 2 mana, 1 and a red, and has level up, red, and tap. His first starting power and toughness is 2/2, and then from levels 1 to 3, Jamie is a 3/3 and gets +X+X, where X is the number of level counters on him, and then finally at level 4+, he gains Trample, Menace, and then Jamie gets +X+X, where X is double the number of level counters on him, and his base power and toughness is 4/4. Jamie is one of the coolest new characters introduced in Street Fighter 6, with his fighting style being a combination of Drunken Master and dancing. Mechanically, this is represented with him being a leveling character, with you having to make him drink from his jug in order to get a jug level, and then once he reaches level 4, being his max level, he becomes way more powerful and gains access to even more moves. But it can be a little risky to stop and take a drink mid-combo or mid-fight. So I thought the best way to represent a level mechanic in Street Fighter was of course to reference the level mechanic that we saw all the way back in Rise of the Eldrazi in Magic the Gathering. One thing that's very notable about my design for Jamie when compared to other leveling cards is that in order to level him up, you have to tap him. This is a big downside, considering you're going to have to essentially take off a turn, considering you do have to level up as a sorcery. So while his endgame is very powerful, it is a little bit risky to fully invest into it. If you wanted to build around him, I think the best way to take advantage of him would be to run a bunch of untappers. So stuff like Zealous Conscripts would be kind of interesting with him, Vizier of the Tumbling Sands, or Samut Voice of Plenty would work very well with him and allow you to level up multiple times in one turn. Finally, we have Marisa, Gloria of Greece, a legendary human warrior 5/3 for 2 black and red with vigilance, and Marisa must be blocked if able to, and Goddess of the Hunt. When Marisa deals combat damage to another creature, if that creature would die this turn, defending player loses life equal to that creature's toughness. Marisa is an awesome new heavyweight gladiator character that packs a mean punch in Street Fighter 6. Her specials are all super cool, but one of my favorites is her level 3 special, Goddess of the Hunt, which has this crazy powerful punch animation that launches your opponent straight into the wall. And I thought a cool way to represent this in Magic the Gathering was by having the defending player essentially take the damage after you kill the creature they're blocking with, essentially doing like a double hit, kind of like how there's the initial hit with the punch and then hitting back into the wall, essentially the wall being the defending player. And obviously if you wanted to build around her, probably the coolest way to take advantage of it would be using extra combats. So you're getting that ability of killing your opponent's creatures multiple times, since they do also have to block. So you could run stuff like Mirage, Seize the Day, or Aggravated Assault to take full advantage of her and take down your opponent's creatures and deal even more damage to them. If you enjoyed this video, you should check out this video right over here where I made custom Magic the Gathering cards based on Scott Pilgrim.